you mentioned that your mom was a single parent.
Mhm.
So how did that affect you, like not knowing your biological father and things like that? Like, how did that affect you growing up?
I think my identity, like I didn't have a sense of identity, and wholeness with the
Mhm.
family because I did envy other kids that had both parents. Like,
Yeah.
I felt like, dang, like why doesn't my dad want to call me or talk
Mhm.
to me? Why isn't he here? And my mom did try to address those things subtly, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But if I'm being honest, I feel like she felt this sort of shame as well, maybe, or
Mhm.
even like guilt, because my mom also didn't have her father, nor did she have was she raised by her mother. So
Mhm.
I think like for her, she was in a survival mode, and
Right.
she sort of felt like, well, that's helped me, and I'm doing okay. So
Right.
we don't maybe need to talk about these things in depth, but sometimes I do wish like there was a little bit more detail
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
just more of a, Aaliyah, this is a situation. You know, you're still loved, you're still
Mhm.
this, you're that,
Mhm.
but it's just maybe he's going through some things or he is going through some things,
Right. Yeah.
And I think like adults sometimes we don't give kids credit to understand that
No, for
kids are not
real.
stupid.
Kids are very, very smart.
They are very observant,
Yeah.
and they know when something's off. Like they
Right.
feel the tension. They
Right.
feel when things aren't right in the
Mhm.
home.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes we don't give kids enough credit to say like they do have the capacity to understand
Yeah.
these things, even though they're like, kids should worry about kid things and adults address the adult. No, these kids, all of us can probably speak to knowing like you knew what was happening in that home.
Right.
And so anyway, I do wish there was a little bit more of a reassurance for
Mhm.
me because I felt like there was always something missing.
Yeah. Was your mom always a single mom, or like what was the
Mm.
story? Like how did that story unfold? How did her love story unfold? I would guess I would say.
Honestly, I don't know fully even to this day. I want to say that I think she was sort of in the predicament where like traditionally you get married because you're pregnant,
Mhm.
and she felt that pressure from family to get married.
Mhm.
But there were issues with my biological and him and his status in the military. And so my mom was like, I got to do what I got to do. So
Right.
they got a divorce shortly after they got married. It
Mhm.
wasn't like a real um I don't know what the word would be, but like they weren't truly walking out together in marriage for very
Mhm.
long. She went off to Japan, and
Mhm.
back then, we didn't have internet, FaceTime. Well, we had internet, but it was dial up. It was very
Right.
slow. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't have video calling on the level that we do today. So it just was a huge gap. It created a huge gap in communication for him and myself to be able to probably really have that
Yeah.
close knit relationship. And I think, my mom, she never really went into detail with me about um, my biological. I didn't realize that wasn't like our situation wasn't normal until she got married again, and then they got divorced, and I realized, oh, this isn't even my real dad. Like I didn't even know
Yeah.
honestly that he wasn't my real dad because he
Mm.
was around when I was so young.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they got divorced, like I think my mom finally explained to me like, it's okay,
Mhm.
that he's not around anymore
Mhm.
and this, but I still felt like this sense of abandonment. And then it was like twofold because I'm like, dang, so my biological isn't him. He's not around, and now he's not around anymore
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So what is like, why don't I have a dad?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. And so in your childhood, did you like go to church? Like so I know you mentioned so your mom did remarry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She did.
And
Yeah.
so now with, your stepdad and your mom, did y'all
Mm-hmm.
end up going to church and doing things like this? Like
Mm-hmm.
what was your background as far as like religion in your household?
Honestly, my mom, so the man that raised me from age 6 and has still been and is currently present in my life,
Mhm.
they met, and in the beginning, religion still was not a true um like factor in our home or anything. When I do remember us going to church a few times, and maybe that was for holidays, maybe it was just random. I remember seeing study Bibles in the house growing up and stuff like that. So I know my mom had a Christian foundation in her beliefs, but we didn't truly start going to church and get saved, give our life to Christ until I was about 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old. We had moved back to Texas from being in Japan for almost 10 years, and my dad had gone and gotten deployed. And so I think that deployment and all the things that were going on in the world, he was introduced to Christianity by someone. And then he and my mom decided, okay, we should start pursuing a relationship with God. And so we started going to a Baptist church. It was a very traditional Baptist church, predominantly white, not very diverse or anything. But I guess my parents felt like that was a place for them to grow in the word at the time. And so that's where we went. For myself, I felt like this huge shift because in Japan, when you're a military family, you're amongst a bunch of different types of people, all types of nationalities and races and whatnot. But going to this small little border town in Texas, being at a predominantly white church, I felt very ostracized, like being the only Black child in my class, being the only Black child in the church. I think that that kind of made me feel unwelcome in a sense. And I won't say that it denied the Lord the opportunity to speak to me and do and for me to get to learn a little bit about the Bible and God, but I do think it kind of created this space where it was just like I don't feel comfortable, even though I do like reading the Bible and going to children's church and all these things. Like I just didn't feel like a safety even there in the church. So yeah, we got baptized and everything. I do remember that, but I didn't understand what all of this stuff meant. I did not, because it's like I think too, parents, they have the best intentions, but it's like just because you're building your relationship with the Lord doesn't mean your kids fully understand or receiving that truth like you are. You know, so I always kind of, even now being where I am in my life, like, you know, how does a parent train up a child in the way they should go, but not necessarily force their faith on the child? Because that's what I think a lot of us deal with is we grow up in these churches and we feel the judgment more than anything. We feel the rules, the restrictions, but we're not really being discipled as the kids. So we're just there because the parents are making us go. And a lot of us don't take to that very well.
Girl, that was my story too. So
you know, it's just kind of like, okay, so I'm here, but like, why am I here? And who is God? And you start asking all these questions. And I remember asking my mom one time a question about God, and she didn't know what to say. She was just like, I don't know. He just it, you know? But just, they don't always have the language. And I don't know. Also, I'd say like the basics of being a Christian, I think that sometimes that gets lost in the sauce when you come into a church setting, because people are so focused on like how they're coming off to others. Like, are you this clean, well-kept family? You know, what are you wearing? And what are you known for around the city? And so it's like people are more focused on that perception piece versus like, I'm here to learn about God and grow in the word. And